Good morning.
Good morning.
Back to the podcast.
Well, how they don't even know it's morning.
Welcome.
Yeah, exactly.
We can edit that out. Just
Yeah,
welcome.
doesn't matter.
All right. So we're back again.
Back again.
Yeah.
Back at about it.
Mike, again. I think people are learning my name out there.
John, Chuck.
Chuck. All right. All right. So we came up with some topics we wanted to speak about, and one that we universally wanted to land on this week was systemic racism, which is something I knew nothing about before we picked this topic. It's a hot button issue, and it's a thing that people speak about. And the reason I didn't know about it, because the way I read about it, it's often invisible to people that are not experiencing it, right? Like you don't even know that it's there unless you're being affected by it. So the systemic racism is basically racism that's built into the systems that govern the United States, right? And like I said, we don't know about them. So what was your guys' understanding? Did you have any understanding of systemic
No,
racism?
I was busy at work all week, dude.
Well, I mean, just in generally life experience, never knew anything about it.
No, I don't specifically know anything about systemic racism.
Mm-hmm.
I think I kind of have my own intuition of my own thoughts, but I'll express those kind of maybe as we travel along through this today. But yeah, as far as, have I literally sat down and researched it? No.
Mm-hmm.
I found that I know about it more than I thought I did in certain elements that, like, for example, like redlining is a big thing with systemic racism, and because of the mortgage industry and stuff like that, I've had to do a lot of training and testing in that area. But I didn't know specifically that it fell underneath systemic racism necessarily. So yeah, I mean, aware of many types of things that fall under the category, but searching the actual category and deep diving into systemic racism, this was a first for me, for sure.
Yeah, redlining was like the biggest factor I think that minorities haven't recovered from. Like the redlining set the stage for how everything's going to unfold, and it's like an uphill battle they've been facing since then. And redlining was introduced by a Democratic president, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Which goes back to like the Democrats and Republicans were different back in the day, the way they viewed things, which is interesting. I don't know if many people know that. Yeah, I mean, I just want to get started.
And well, then redlining, so if anybody doesn't know what it is, why don't we bring up the definition of redlining real quick so I can actually give the exact, but...
Well, so redlining was introduced the FHA was going to hand out loans to the impoverished people because of the Great Depression. So it was created to help families get back on their feet. So the FHA went ahead and deemed areas where minorities lived as risky to loan to them.
Yep.
So that's where the systemic racism can be highlighted, because minorities weren't able to accumulate wealth. That's the big thing about systemic racism, that since they've never been able to accumulate wealth, it's just moved on generationally, right? Like the main measure of wealth for middle-class people is home ownership and having equity in your home. And the people in the 40s and 50s that had that equity were able to pass it on to their children by sending them to college, being able to take care of their elders with that money. And that's just a ripple effect that has, still affects today for those people. But go ahead. You want to speak more about redlining?
No, I mean, you essentially covered it. I mean, I can read the definition. Just for redlining is a discriminatory practice in which financial services are withheld from neighborhoods that have significant numbers of racial and ethnic minorities. And it was interesting. I was listening to another podcast, and there was a big debate. They were having a debate about systemic racism, and one of the things that was being debated was the appraisals of the houses, right? And the one thing that I saw that, like, I agree that redlining definitely was a direct effect, and I agree about, that's where a lot of wealth is held, right? But the thing that I noticed when they were talking about it, and redlining stopped in 1968, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Fair Housing Act.
And so, but it doesn't mean that it's not still present, but in many ways. But I think it's still present in more of the sense because those areas, those neighborhoods essentially became like the ghettos in a sense.
It did.
And so it's, it's like it can't go anywhere. It's going to be present. And they were talking about, oh well, on average, the guy was trying to say on average it was $300,000 less that a African American family would receive for an appraisal on their home. Now, being in the mortgage industry, you and me both know, if there was an African American family living in a neighborhood that was filled with whites, Hispanic, Latinos, Asians, they might get a lower appraisal, but most likely it wouldn't be due to who they are, because that neighborhood, if a house was going to get appraised $300,000 less in that neighborhood, it would devalue other homes in that area as well. So you would see a negative impact versus a positive impact just across the board. And if it was racist in that sense, that racism would be hurting everybody, not just that individual family. So, and you don't see that. You don't really see houses go for that much under value. You would actually, in this market nowadays, I would almost say that even if it was appraised less, you would see somebody come in and pay more. So, and we've kind of experienced that. But yeah, it's very interesting. The whole, when I researched it even talked about, because of the way that they outlined the cities in those certain specific areas, that now, because the homes were, the banks didn't want to invest in the area. Businesses as such, probably you're not getting as the business loans as much, I would imagine, is a direct reflection of that as well. But then the schools are funded by the property taxes, right? So also on top of that, now the schools have reduced funding compared to, for example, a neighborhood that was all white and that had more income, and the houses are worth more money. So now they're paying more and the schools have more funds. And that was another reason for it, and which I think is all very valid. The one thing that as I was researching and everything going through it, the one thing that just kept coming back to me was that, I feel like whenever people talk about racism and it's this huge thing, it's like an argument of the people, right? But as I researched this, I felt like it's an argument that was actually introduced to us, like put in front of us by the government, by officials, by policies, whatever it may be, that created this. And then it's like, and people still, and like, as you said, it was democratically created, but then at the same time, it's also one of their biggest issues that they're running on. And so it's like, well, you created it in the first place. Like, I don't even know why. So that's where I feel like it's almost pitting us against each other. Because we don't like, and and as I dug deeper and stuff into that, I think it's, he even talked about, goes into sports teams and stuff like that. And that's where I had kind of mentioned to Chuck, but it's like, but if I would never, if I watched like a NFL combine and I watched two a white player and a black player, or any ethnicity for that matter, compete for a position, I would never feel like, the facts are there, you're watching it happen. I would never feel like that one guy didn't get the position because he was a certain color, because the teams are going to look at it as, no, this is about, we want the best, we want to win. And so that's where I don't see it as much, where people talk about it as much. I do see it on the coaching side of things that people talk about it, but not as much when the players, when it's like, when it's a definitive thing that you can see, it's not as easy to talk about. But when there's sometimes gray areas as to why and everything like that, it's very blown up and people get very angry about it. And that's what I've been noticing as far as a lot of the articles that I've been reading.
Well, yeah, that's something that I can kind of talk on. My dad was a big framing contractor in Southern California, and like in the East, they came out and they're talking to him and they're like, hey, you need to have a certain percentage of blacks, certain percentage of Hispanics, certain percentage of whites or whatever. And my dad ended up having to fire he fired some black people out of despite because of what these people were saying, because he had too many black people, the percentage. So he fired them, and then he got ridiculed for firing them. So it's like, and his explanation was like, look, I hire the best guy for the best job. I don't care if I have a whole crew full of Hispanics or a whole crew full of blacks or a whole crew full of white. It's I'm hiring according to the best job. And I think that's kind of where I have seen the most, is we're just hiring in accordance because there's this certain percentage that we need to have. And it's like, to me, that's ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? Like John was saying with the football team, just because he's the next, you have too many blacks or Hawaiians or whatever. You need to have more white. Well, you're out here to make money, and to make money, you want the next best person. Maybe not racism or anything like that, but I've heard like the fire department has to hire so many females or whatever. Well, I'll tell you what, unless that chick's gonna put me over her back and carry me down the stairs, like I want the next best person in line. I want the person that was number 1 on the test. I don't want number 15 because we needed to hire uh, a Hawaiian or whatever it is, due to this. And for me, I mean, I don't necessarily know where I'm going with this, but it's kind of just like,
I think you're saying it's tricky, like fixing it, right? I think, like John was saying, it was something created. I think it was created by data, right? Like they compiled data and see like trends of how things are happening to different people, right? And that's why it's invisible to us. They said it was like an iceberg, right? Like you have overt racism at the tip, and then like underneath the surface is all this systemic racism that we don't even know about. It's happening unconsciously between us. So you're talking about like the devices they're using to try to fix it. They're not all right, right? Like, so, and that's what's tricky about this, like sifting through data and saying, okay, this is what it is and how do we fix it? And you're right, like Democrat president and administration, the New Deal created this, but I think it's also like pretty evolved to say, hey, we made a mistake and we need to focus on this and we need to change this and try to help people that were affected by this, right?
Right.
So that's a good thing, I think.
Is where DEI comes from.
Yeah, see, I don't know much about DEI, and that must be the fixing of this kind of stuff. I just went in deep to what is the root of maybe DEI and we can talk about that next. I have no clue what that is. Maybe I'm a moron. I just don't know what it is.
Well, I mean, the principle of it, right, though?
Not really. I mean, I know there's diversity, like pushing diversity, equality, inclusion. Yeah, like trying to make that more prevalent. But go ahead. That's what I understand of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's inclusion. It's basically they want to see whether it's and I don't know off the top of my head whether or not it's percentage based or not but they want to see that, certain of, especially I know like state, federal, city run jobs and everything like that. And then of course I would imagine big corporations and stuff. I don't know how they exactly regulate them for DEI and stuff, but I would imagine it would probably be something in the form of, if you do XYZ, you would be taxed so differently or potentially or something like that. But essentially it's, they want a certain part of your makeup needs to be either, other than in a sense, so it could be female instead of male, or in a sense before, it would have been trans prior to Trump taking office, could be potentially as well. That started being a thing as well. And then race as well. They had to be makeups of different ethnicity groups. And so that's where the big questions started coming in, whether or not it's the best person for the job necessarily versus the right color to fit the the bill, to check the box. And that's where a lot of the question marks come and stuff like that. But even then, it's like I feel like that's the crossroad where it starts to, because when you look at systemic racism, it's kind of just there. There's not necessarily a side to it. I mean, of course, people are going to take sides on every matter, right? And they're going to say, "Oh, I don't see it at all." Or whatever. The reality of it is, we know it's what happened with the redlining and how the areas were set up and how the banks interacted with them and everything. All it's not arguable. I mean, it's not debatable, right? And at the end of the day, I always feel like everything comes down to the money. I think if you drill anything down to the very, very, very root of it, especially when it comes to politics, especially when it comes to banking and everything like that, I think it has everything to do with money. And so when it came to outlining the red areas, it's that they're not as worth our investment, right? And I'm sure they're going to look at it as a bank. They're going to look at, there's lower income. There's more chance that we're going to have default on payments like that. So why are we going to invest a lot of money there? It's not as safe in a sense as what they're trying to say. And that's why they go the other direction, which is not right in any way, shape, or form. But that's what created.
Was that then?
Yeah.
Or that's not now?
I mean, people could try to argue and say it's still now. I'm not saying that's one of the things is like, I think there are cases. There's still cases. There will always be cases. But I think the problem is sometimes to push the narrative and to drive points, they'll take the one case and turn it into like a speaking point when it's like, a point 0.00001% of the times that this XYZ happens. Like for example, if one of the podcasts I was watching, the guy made the statement of that the appraisal came in $300,000 less on the house. There's a lot of things to unpack there. Just that statement of like, what was the house worth? And stuff like that. But reality, that could have happened, and it could have been a one-time thing. But does that mean that that's the norm?
Mm-hmm.
And I think people love to grab the one-time thing and use it for the 60 seconds of fame or 60 seconds to get their point across, and not look at what damage does that do, because you're not really actually putting truthful facts out there. And I'm not saying there's not truth out there, but I think that if you stop putting out the shit that just you feel like pushes your point across, and actually go back to the facts for some of the, especially the talk when it comes to systemic racism, is that you'll actually have a more cordial conversation. And then the problem with DEI is I feel like you create diversity by just introducing it, because no matter what no matter how you look at it, I get it. The individuals that are afforded the opportunities due to DEI, they might not have had those before, and they deserve those opportunities. And the reason they might not have had them could be because they're a subpar candidate, or it could be because of racism. But I would say that in this day and age, in most areas, I would imagine that is more far and few between. Like racism tends to lie within a person than it does within a organization at times, unless that person's in charge of the organization, right? But even but you could go and you could work at one firehouse, and you could have one captain who does the hire. I don't even know who exactly does the hiring at a firehouse, but he could have he could be completely down the middle of the road and just hire the best firefighters he sees, and that's all he's doing, is just try to build his best team. And then you could have another guy that's just an asshole and a dirtbag, and he has views that most people don't have, and then he builds something that's just like it's just a big ball of racism. And then, but people, unfortunately, that's a talking point that makes racism kind of just carry on and forever. It's like I don't notice anybody else walking down the street as much as they notice me. I look at every single person that walks by me as, hey, you could be a nice guy, you could be a bad guy. I don't know. I just walk by them, and I'm cautious about everybody. But I get it. You go to some areas and some people, you look at things and you see things. We're also responsible. I think movies and all that play into a lot of systemic racism as well, and putting the appearance of things out there that may not be there, might not be real.
Not what you have to say.
No, I was going to go off of what you said. Like, hiring people is difficult, right? I mean, you get to meet them for 5 minutes, and you get to judge, how is this person going to act? How are they going to perform? A cool thing that when we worked together, me and John, is they did working interviews. You would work for like a couple of days and be like, hey, is this guy a fit? Is this really what he says he is when he's inside this interview? Which does not happen a lot, in many companies, but that is a great thing. And you were saying like building a good team, but what is the measurable good? Like, how do I know what defines a good team? To me and you may be different.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I think that the overall feel the systemic racism is there's a system that's fucked up. Not necessarily individuals, but just system is it's a fixed game, right? I think that you hit on something that was huge, was the educational system for minorities. That's like one of the things that they cannot, it's like a vicious cycle that I don't know how they're going to get out of, because it's these poor schools, they can't afford counselors, which our children have access to, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they have more resource officers there, and it's like this, they have like zero policies, like zero, there's no wiggle room. If you do something wrong, like you're going to jail. And there's more reporting to police officers because they have resource officers there versus counselors, things like that. But I feel like you want to say something.
No.
I want to hear what you have to say about this, because I think it's the prison pipeline for black males, I think, is a thing too. I don't know how you guys feel about that. Like school to prison pipeline, black males or minorities are more commonly get expelled for infractions that they do, and it disenfranchises them, it disconnects them from the school, and that's the start of them the school to prison pipeline. That's what they call it.
That was one of the things they said. Well, it would be interesting because that's where it comes down to policies too. Because one of the things is if you took the funding for the schools and you put it at a state level versus just you're getting it from you're getting both a little bit, but where a substantial amount of it is coming from the property taxes in that area. That's, it's like, it seems to me, well, that's an easy fix. You just make it so that all the schools are receiving the same amount of funding. And then at least that fixes that. Now, granted, you might not see that change for, generations. I don't know, but that's one that when I read that, I was surprised that just looking at that, reading that somebody hasn't been like, well, this system doesn't work.
Do you think more affluent communities would be okay with their money going to inner city school? Or they would be like, no, I pay these taxes. My kid should have a better school because I pay the taxes on my property taxes.
I mean, I wouldn't have.
How would you feel, Chuck?
I wouldn't have an issue with. I'm for all kids. It doesn't matter race, doesn't matter sex or nothing like that. And it's the education system, is the start of our next generation. So I mean, if it was divided.
Mm-hmm.
Divided up evenly, I don't have an issue with that. What I have an issue is where, and I'm not saying that this is everywhere, and I know this is a very touchy subject, but is the home life. My sister, she was new to teaching, so it wasn't like she was just going to go into a nice school or whatever. She ended up getting a job down in Vegas, and she was at, to say the worst of the worst school down there, and she's like, there's no signs of respect. Kids are raping kids in the bathrooms. Like it was horrible. So I don't necessarily know if that's going to if given equal amounts of money is going to divvy it down, because in reality, if a kid doesn't have respect for, if he's not shown respect in a household, white, black, Latino, it doesn't matter, any race, and that just goes into the school, like, what's extra money going to do to teach that kid anything? You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of this stuff starts from the home. And I'm not just saying that it's, I guess the racism that we're talking about has been fed to us. And I'm saying through our government, because in reality, we keep talking about black and Latinos and whites or whatever, but if a kid was taught no respect at home from a parent and he transitioned that into the school and his learning, regardless of whatever color, sex he is, that's the pathway that's going to go to prison. I don't necessarily feel that it's at the school. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? We're forgetting the whole home life.
No, you're right. That's a contributor to it. Yeah, I mean, kids just don't become bad. I think you're right. Yeah, they just, there needs to be some kind of role model there, and part of that systemic racism that I'm reading about, is the home structure is thrown off because of this, right? Their fathers have been incarcerated at a higher rate. They're more apt to be arrested. So one of the crazy things I read when I was looking to the criminal justice part of it, I'm into criminal justice, right, is that cocaine arrests versus crack arrests, they're chemically the same, right? But the punishment for crack versus cocaine is like disproportionate. You go to jail longer for crack versus cocaine, and cocaine is predominantly like a white drug. Crack is
one worse than is. I know they're predominantly the same chemicals, but does one have a more adverse effect?
I'm
wondering. Crack is
do cocaine, you're down in like 20 minutes. You do crack, you're down in like 2 fucking days. So it's like, yeah, when you're running around like an idiot in the middle of fucking night, you're definitely gonna get in trouble.
Wait, what? Well, I know a lot. I know cocaine was like a more rich man drug.
Still is, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. But especially like in the 80s, like that was a big thing, right? My more thing is that. Yeah, I know people used to do cocaine because it would, well, at least from what I understood, it was like a pick me up, like let's go. You felt
great,
felt great, right? So, never did it myself, but
I do not comment on that.
But my thing is the difference between the two was one worse, than the other necessarily. Like I've no,
Chemically,
my perception of
it's the way you
what it does
ingest it.
to the person is worse than what I'm thinking.
Well, I
But
think crack is. I'm sorry, crack. I think is cut with different drugs. Cocaine's pure, and it's also the way you ingest it. Right, like crack is smoked, cocaine is snorted.
yes,
It could be shot up cocaine as well, but I don't know. I just maybe the way they're labeled, like this is a cocaine arrest versus this is a crack arrest. And I'm sorry I was speaking over you, John.
no, you're fine. I was thinking, because one of the things that when I was looking it up, it was interesting, and I'm not necessarily.
Crack is more concentrated because it's faster onset.
I think it lasts like substantially longer in your system too.
What's the
And
negative?
I've never smoked crack.
What would be the negative effects of which one has the worst negative effects, adverse effects? Yeah.
I like how were you just reading that?
Hmm.
It's like San Francisco, LA, New York.
Yeah, and maybe I'm being systemically racist by saying it's more predominantly white versus black, but that's what I read in these
No, I think
studies, right?
I could agree.
Well, I mean, the first thing it says cocaine causes DNA damage.
Stimulant cocaine can be smoked. This was just one thing that I was reading
I
about.
think it's the most addictive form of cocaine.
Mhm.
Could be why too, I guess. But I agree with you. I could see that there was some sort of that would be a thing, that because it was a lower, in a sense, you're saying like it was essentially a lower income
Mhm.
drug, and that's why they were busting, because it generally associated with the lower. I mean, I agree with you. I think that the crime, it's one of the things. That was one of the things I was looking up. So I looked up. It says, now granted, this article's, I'll be honest, it's now 5 years old, but it was 2020, June 2020. But it was talking about, I just was searching what are the top cities with violent crime, and then who's running the cities, right?
Let's see. Can we try to guess? Chicago,
Detroit, number one,
Detroit, Chicago.
and it's run by the mayor's Democrat,
Mhm.
or at least it was in 2020. I don't know who the current mayor is, but
I would say probably 100% it's Democrat.
yeah, Memphis, Tennessee's number two.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Democrat, Jim Strickland. Birmingham, Alabama's number 3, Democrat. Baltimore's number 4, Democrat. Flint, Michigan, number 5, Democrat. Number 6 is St. Louis, Democrat. Number 7, Danville, Illinois, nonpartisan election. Michigan, a nonpartisan election. Wilmington, Delaware, Democrat is number 9. Number 10, Camden, New Jersey, Democrat. 11.
Camden's bad.
Pine Bluff, Arkansas, Democrat. Kansas City, Missouri is number 12, Democrat. San Bernardino, California, number 13, Democrat. 14, Louisiana, Democrat. 15, Little Rock, Arkansas, Democrat. 16, Cleveland, Democrat. 17, Milwaukee, Democrat. Stockton, California, number 18, Democrat. 19, Monroe, Louisiana, Democrat. 20, Chester, Pennsylvania, Democrat.
Got it. Seems like a pretty extensive list of Democrats.
Yes.
So my
I was
question
actually
is, so
shocked as I got to the bottom. I thought I would see at least a couple of Republicans in there, to be honest with
yeah, so it's probably the ideology of those cities. They probably have a lot of minorities, right? They're going to vote Democrat.
you. Mm-hmm.
Do you think a Republican-led, leader would help? Would that be your question? That'd be the question I would have. How would they help?
I think it could help, but I feel that Republicans are more prominent to working. I think a lot of the Democratic way is to live off the government. The government gives you just enough for you to live and doesn't want you to ever to do better, so they can kind of keep you under a microscope, is how I feel. And so I don't think just by having a Republican to come in there and say, "Oh, we're going to fix everything," it's going to take it would take a lot. Yeah, they would have to come in here, and then the people that are living off the government and getting government housing and government checks and EBT cards and all that other stuff, I feel
Dominic brought up something interesting.
I feel that would have to transition into, those people having to get out there to work and to pay taxes and to contribute and everything else. And I feel that would be when you're busy with work, like I was this week, why I didn't get back to you guys, you don't do some of these things. You know what I mean? You're not gangbanging, you're not stealing, you're not smoking crack, because you're busy working. You're proud of something that you own.
That you own.
Opposed to just, hey, give me another bottle of water. Give me another bottle of water. You don't actually ever realize what that bottle of water is worth until you actually work for it. Does that make sense? So I don't.
Dominic's bringing up some interesting information about the safest place to live, and he brought up 5 cities that are democratically ran or have democratic leadership.
Oh, and I don't doubt that. I don't doubt
the top 5.
I don't doubt you're going to find comparisons on both sides. But what I
wonder, the weird mayors and governors, the way their
that's all.
State votes is not necessarily who's running. Like a lot, like Alabama had like a Democratic governor, so it's interesting how that runs. Like, because you think, okay, it's Alabama, they got to have a bunch of Republicans, right. But it's not always party line in these things. So,
no, I agree. I actually think you see when I was looking at, kind of saw that it's both very wealthy areas and safe areas. There's definitely Democratic leadership there as well. But you you also saw it vastly on the other side of the aisle too, and that's why it just was interesting of like the policies. Democrats got to live somewhere too. They don't want to go live in the redlining areas that they lined out so far long ago, right? But I think that's the problem. Is like, what is the fix? You can argue, okay, so say like we change the school system, right? And we fund it's all schools receive the same amount. Which I don't think, at the end of the day, I think that's actually the best idea, one of the best ideas ever, in my opinion, because regardless of, they do have hurdles with that, like the reality is look, the ghetto is the ghetto and it's there. And it's the reasons why it's there, we can go back through there and we can look at redlining and all this stuff like that. And it definitely has, it definitely helped, grow these urban cities into ghettos and stuff like that. But the problem is now they're not as safe, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's because of policies and stuff, we can that's a debate. But so your other question, the other problem you're going to have is getting those teachers that would take jobs at those extremely, those overqualified teachers, or want to call it, that would take jobs at places that would be more safe, and out of those areas, versus the teachers that would take the job and take that risk to go teach in those schools that, or ultimately possibly more, there's a danger associated with it, right? And so, I think the first thing you have to do is you have to figure out a way to make things safe again. That's the first thing you have to do. Because if you want to come in and change that place, the areas, and eliminate, the effects of redlining, you have to actually change it. You can't let it to keep festering. If it's a wound, then you got to fix it. It doesn't mean eliminate it. It means heal it, whatever. But, and that's the problem. I just feel like, everybody wants to go back and forth on all these different policies and blah, blah, blah. But the reality is you got to make it safe first, right? Once you make safe, you pave the way for everything else to happen. Teachers will come in there. Businesses will come in there. Once safety's there, that's the question. How do you pull that off? And how do you pull safety off without having a whole bunch of police go into those neighborhoods and have a whole bunch of incidents that scream racism? So it's almost like the move to fix it could potentially also be a move that sets you back as well, because there's going to be things that come out of that movement if you sent in people to start cleaning up those cities that are going to spark racial debates. And granted, I think racism is one of those things that you can never eliminate it. And it's not really racism. It's actually just what tends to be confused with character. I think it has to do with the person's character. If you meet somebody, my parents always taught me, first impression's everything. Dress as serious as you want to be taken, right? And stuff like that. So whether or not we want to debate it or not, if I dress a certain way at an interview, like if I dress in a suit, I'm going to have a better chance of winning that, potentially a better chance to be a more of a potential candidate, because I'm dressed to impress. I look right. I have my stuff ready and everything like that, right? And that's the type of thing, if you see that across the board, you don't see color in that scenario. You see a person that's engaged, it's motivated, that's taking the extra time to get ready to do these things. It's these small things in life that you can do to set yourself apart from other people. And that's and that becomes your character. And some people's character just aren't there. And so, and the problem is when you meet them, it could be, I could meet a black guy. Like I was in the military 14 years. I had friends from all walks. Never a racist moment ever. But there was definitely guys that were Hispanic that I didn't like, or, black that I didn't like, and white that I didn't like. It just had to do with the person. It didn't have anything to do with the color. I think that's what tends to be very present as well, but it gets confused with racism a lot, as I feel personally. But not saying that racism doesn't exist, but I do feel like there's a line between the character of a person and actual racism. Some people are assholes. And if you're an asshole and you're a minority and an asshole, well, you're going to say, well, you're racist because you don't like me. No, I don't like you because you're an asshole. And that's what the problem is. Like, so you got to come in and you got to fix everything. You got to make it safe, but how? And that's where I never hear the answers on that. I don't even know if you can. And I think, we know it's all these systems that we know are broken. Like, we know the welfare system's broken. Everybody says that. They said it forever.
Why?
Well, I know one of the biggest reasons is I've known people that were on it. And the one thing is if they didn't work, they had reduced rent and they made more money off assistance. If the minute they worked and got over a certain amount of hours, the money that they would get from assistance would drop so substantially that they couldn't afford to live anymore. Like, all of a sudden now they can't get that reduced rent. And it's not like, they're working at like the guy that I knew was working at Dollar General. He got a job at Dollar General. So it's not like he's making a ton of money. So, but just that little bit bumps them out of the ability to have that reduced rent apartment, or it might have even been that they got it for free. But so they're almost like, well, why am I going to go to work and try to work this job which is the right thing to do, when in doing that, now I'm setting my family back because now I don't have as much money. Now I have to find a different place to live, but I can't afford the other place to live because the other place isn't reduced rent. So now I have to not work to be able to keep getting the assistance and to be able to keep a roof over my family's head. And that was the conversation.
So you think
I think that's a regular.
people are abusing?
You can argue that look, do people abuse everything? 100%. And I definitely think that people abuse the system. But there is a line between telling the people they're abusing it, but then also making the system so that it actually kind of has to be abused to be able to help them. Otherwise, you're not helping them. I mean, you're not helping somebody if the minute they get a job and the minute they make over a certain amount of money, you're taking away all of their assistance.
Mm-hmm.
You're not helping them. You're just, now you can fly. Well, just because they flew out of the nest for the first 5 minutes, that's not on your feet. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Are we talking about race using it, like races, or just people?
I'm just talking about the system. But the welfare system and everything crosses all races.
It does.
Right?
That's correct.
So I get it. There's predominantly minorities, but
No.
but I'm not looking at that aspect. I mean, the guy that I knew was Hispanic.
Mm-hmm.
But
Predominantly white people are on
I could see that
welfare.
Yeah.
I think it's almost half it is white people.
But yeah, so it's like,
And I see what you're saying, John, in the sense of, imagine if you actually got up to go to work every day and your neighbor just sat at home every day and you're just struggling. Pretty soon you're going to have that conversation. Man, this is what I do or whatever. I don't pay rent, or I have reduced rent. I get my EBT card. So at some point, this guy's going to be like, dude, why do I get up and try to make it every single day when this guy just sits at home, he sleeps in or whatever? Pretty soon, this guy's probably going to fold. You know what I mean? And just be like, hey, man, show me how you get that. You know what I'm saying? Opposed to, like, I know Folsom, California, they have a low income side. Folsom is, it's a nice place. You know what I'm saying?
Folsom, yeah.
And I would like to say that the low income was created to get families to move into Folsom, to get their kids into a better school district so they can flourish or whatever. Well, what happened is that this low income area got populated and everybody kind of just sat there and just stayed stagnant. You know what I mean? Opposed to, like John was saying, the government to try to help them get to that next step. Like, hey, we moved you to here Now let's go ahead and get you to that next step to where you can get out and another family can come in behind you, and we can start the stepping process of just building you and building you and building you. But that, like what John was saying, is the government comes in and it's like, oh, we've helped you long enough, you're on your own feet. It's like, no, you're not on your own feet. You know what it's like. You know what I'm saying? I think we've all experienced that throughout our life. It's like, just because you're making money again doesn't mean you're out of the red. It takes time. You know what I mean? It's like, I almost feel like once you start making money again, it's almost like you're even farther in the hole, because you're not spending money. You're just trying to get yourself back to zero. And that's hard to do.
Yeah.
So I think that, places like Folsom, they're doing these things to try, but they don't actually help you get up to the next step, because now that low income area is filled, nobody else can move in. You know what I'm saying? Now their kids have gone and moved off to college or whatever. So now that low income place is filled with just people that are sitting there stagnant. There's I shouldn't say there's no new families moving in, but it's not as prominent as what it should have be, or what it should be, or what it should have been made for. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So now those kids have gone, they went to Folsom, they went to the nicer school district. Now they've moved out and the parents are still sitting there. And I think it's either like, what is that quote? Shit or get off the pot. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's kind of something that Folsom needs to do with that low income. It's like, hey, look, you moved in here, your kids went to a good school, but you're sitting here. Like, you move to the next step so we can get in a family behind you type thing. You know what I'm saying?
I wonder what the average time of somebody receiving welfare is.
You look it up.
If there's like, the average person's on it for like 15 years, or if they're on it for 3 and they're, because you're saying like, you need to move on. Like how long are people staying on welfare?
Well, and it's like, what's the end game?
Yeah.
As humans, we like a goal. When we have that goal, we know whether it's, hey, we're saving for that trip to Mexico. Our goal's 10 grand. It's when you do that, when you set that goal, generally you'll start hitting those markers. It might be a little bit back and forth, but what's the goal to get out? Accumulated months.
Housing assistance. So this is just people in general. It's not even like broken down by race. One or more people majors. So 43 months is the...
Well, 49 months but I don't...
what are we looking at, Dominic?
So it's saying between 37 and 48 months is, for one or more major assistance programs, is between 37 and 48 months is 31.2%. And
I got it.
It looks like 43% is between 25 and 36 months for one or more major assistance programs. Medicaid looks like it's 35 roughly across the board. SNAP, which I don't really know what SNAP is. I've heard of it before.
Okay. EBT. Okay.
So that's
housing assistance.
37 and 48 is 30%. So yeah, between 3 and 4 years.
That was 2009 through 2012. Do we have...
A time ago, yeah.
That was coming out of that 2000.
That's coming out of the crash.
So that could be.
But it's still interesting what we're seeing there. But
no, absolutely. So
I don't know.
Yeah, I think the racism thing, I think just it stems from the government just saying that there's blacks and whites, like John said. I see a person on the street, you know what I'm saying? Like he was saying, if they came to an interview, if we had a panel of 5 people right here and every single one of them was, had a haircut, and every single one of them had the exact same suit on and everything else, would we just be like, oh, no to this guy, dude, because he's the minority?
Well,
I don't think I wouldn't even cross my mind.
No, because I've actually, so me and Mike, I used to pull Mike in to interview potential hires back when we used to work together. And you would get the most interesting people, and it would be from all walks, all races. And I can't even, not one time, 100% transparency in all honesty, and you can tell me if you ever saw otherwise, but not one time did race or anything to do with what the outcome was, in my opinion. From when we hired people, like, we would talk to people, we would listen to their stories, we'd interview them. I mean, I think if anything, I might have, I might have hired, um, I might have even, like, I don't know, like I might have hired guys that I felt more, I might have actually even hired guys that I felt were a little bit more, undertreated,
Rougher around the hitches.
and underrepresented, that
Yeah.
to give them a chance, to give them a chance to, make more money, have a good, living and stuff like that, but it was interesting. I mean, I had a guy come in a 3-piece suit. I don't know, or like at least I don't know about 3-piece, but I've been watching this TV show. And this guy wears a 3-piece suit all the time, so I think it's funny. But I don't know if you remember the guy that came. This guy came in. He's like He's like, I'm like, what do you? I'm like, oh, how's it going? Can you tell us what you do? What you're currently doing? And he's like, oh, I'm the CEO of my such and such company. I'm like, and this is like the basic job that we have at the organization. It's like a driver job that's still doing deliveries. And this guy comes in and he says he's the CEO of his company. So I'm a little taken back in the sense of like, what? And then he gives me this whole thing that basically his dad left him all this money and he created a business and it failed. And he's like crying and everything in the whole interview. And at the end of it, I didn't feel sorry for the guy. I felt like I was an idiot. I didn't want to hire him. You know what I mean? I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, and first of all, you don't do that in an interview. But it was never because of the person's color. It was never because of anything else other than the character. Like, for example, that was just that guy's character. I'm like, first of all, you lost. I mean, you must not be. You took all your dad's money and you invested it. You lost it all, and you're sitting here crying in front of the guy you're trying to get another job from. I don't know if that's necessarily the best plan, but okay. But it was everything to do with the man's character. I just looked at that character and how he was acting and like that, and I was like, that's not the fit for me. Not to mention I didn't want a CEO in the lowest in business because that in the lowest position because that can be a pain in the ass. They try to run things. Yeah. But yeah, never ever. But I'm not saying that's the case across the board. I know it's not. But it's like one of those things where, I don't. It'd be interesting to see. It's like when you think about. I know one of the things they talk about is represented in specific areas. So you've like science, right? They talked about when I was reading about. They were talking about how science is, a lot of. It's not as diverse. There's more white scientists in a sense and everything. And they were saying they were trying to argue whether it was because of the lack of education that's presented because of the school systems don't receive as much money, and that way there's not as much colleges looking in that area to try to give scholarships and everything like that. Was it due to that, right? Or was it just due to the fact of that? It's just the candidates aren't there.
Well, I think because they didn't have opportunities in school. Is that what?
No, they're just not they just don't feel like they're qualified enough. Not because, if they go up against each other, because I know they were talking about, they don't have the opportunities in school, so they're not going to get to go to college necessarily. And then after that, so you're not going to see as many people going into science and everything like that. But I guess the two questions would be is one, is it, when I say the candidates is like, is that not an interest as much,
Well, that could be a byproduct of the systemic racism. What is the measurable of a good scientist? What school they went to, right? Like, hey, I'm a Harvard educated scientist versus a guy I went to Sac State and that was the best I could do, because of my situation. I don't know.
I would say probably 40 years ago, most people would look at the Harvard aspect of that and lean towards the Harvard, right? I'd say nowadays I could see it kind of going both ways. I know that, I don't know if people put as much regard in the school systems and the specific colleges they went to nowadays as much as they did before. I think before it was very much like Harvard, Yale. It's very much kind of old boys club in that type of scenario. Like it's the best of the best. That's what they're recruiting. I think nowadays, now that there's a lot more, everything's a lot more visual. There's a lot more communication. There's a lot more transparency. Everything. I think you see people from all walks going to even, junior colleges and stuff like that coming out with, and they're still top of their game. There's, they're coming into the field. But I think that's where you see like it's passion. I mean, I would imagine for science, if you're going to be a scientist, generally, there's some sort of a passion behind that.
Yeah,
to become a scientist. And that's what I meant is like maybe the passion isn't there. Now, whether or not that's because of the school systems or whatnot, I don't know. If you have a cool science teacher, that can totally change your view. I'm just being honest. If you have a cool science,
no,
you can totally change your view on it. I just don't know if that's specifically directly related or not. But that's where it starts with. Okay, well, let's clean up the cities and let's fund those schools correctly. At least it's a start.
One of my good friends is an English teacher, and he said, "You know who the biggest assholes are?" He said, "Science teachers." Because they all thought they were going to be some like huge scientists, and they're like, we're just sitting here teaching little punks.
Well,
and they're big assholes.
Like Fauci.
Well, no, what was interesting is they were
He's pretty high scientist. I mean,
He is. We could. That's
they were talking about. Can we look up how many? What percentage of English teachers are Democrat?
Oh, I bet you there's a high number of that.
They were talking about. I was, and this is kind of. It's still, I think, kind of
I
hovers over this topic, but the conversation is that where in the politic world, where did the Democrats start to lose? What did it say?
97%.
Yeah,
English teachers.
97%. Yeah, 97
to 3 Republicans.
97 Democrats for every 3 Republicans. Yeah, and so it was saying that it was talking about how
Health teachers with 99 Democrat and 1 Republican.
For which one?
For health.
Excuse me. And so what they were saying was that they were trying to figure out like where, because the Democrats lost a lot of their constituents. Would we say that? A lot of people switched sides and voted Republican, which hadn't been a thing for like a lot of different, the Latino vote was a big one that the young male Latino was a big one. They talked about like that. They talked about where did they go wrong and how can they fix it moving forward. And one of the things the interviewer in the podcast I listened to brought up is he said the Democrats still have the school system, and they're saying it's one of the most important. And you can literally sit there and imprint on children your thoughts, your philosophies, what you feel, your democratic views and stuff like that. So
they call it indoctrinating.
Yeah, indoctrinate. But so they were talking about how of all these places they've got it wrong, this is still one of the places they have it. But they said the problem is with that is that now they'll say one thing, and with technology and the kids nowadays are so much more in tune with the world than we kind of were, because the world's like on their, like right in front of them, right on their phones and stuff, that they'll just look it up and be like, you're wrong, but back in the day, those students that came out of the schools, there was a good chance that those views that the teachers were putting on them and stuff would stick, because when we were growing up, there wasn't a whole lot of outside source. If you didn't check out a book from the library, or you didn't watch it on the nightly news, or maybe hear about it from your friend, from your parents or something, for the most part, your bubble of knowledge of everything that's going on in this world was pretty much school. Nowadays, that bubble is vast because it touches the world in the sense of that you have a phone in your hand, you can look up anything, you can look up different points of views and everything like that. So it's saying that basically that hold and everything has changed, and you're going to start seeing kids be more independent in their thinking and stuff like that. So I don't know. It was just interesting when I was listening to him talking about how many of them are Democrats and stuff like that. So,
and you think it's a negative thing having more Democratic?
No, I don't think it's a negative thing. I think at the end of the day, I think both parties can find common ground at times, right? So I think the biggest part of it is with the racism aspect of things, the Democratic Party seems to they like to push it, I guess, and highlight it a lot. It seems like.
Highlight what? Well, their views.
DEI. For instance, DEI.
Oh no, I'm trying to get on track with the.
That's what I'm talking about. No. What do you mean? I'm sorry.
I asked if you think it's bad that there's more Democratic teachers than Republican teachers.
No, I don't think so. Granted, you'd love to see it even across the board, but I guess my point is that prior in the year, a long time, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, yes. Nowadays, I would say not necessarily, because the students kind of have their own compass in a sense, and they tend to venture out and look.
My son does it all the time.
Yeah, he's in here looking up stuff for us for a podcast. Yeah. I'm just saying, I would have never, he's going to walk away from this, and we might talk about something he would have never necessarily have researched. right? Not, specifically. And then we start talking about it and he goes, oh, that's interesting. And then he looks into it, right? So I think that they have their own compass nowadays. So I don't know if it can be as much of a negative impact or positive impact as it would have been before. I think people are just going to be neutral and find their own ways and kind of just come to their own conclusions but that's where, social media can be interesting and be also dangerous if you don't research it enough.
Do you think that your kids are being influenced by somebody's political view versus just learning? You do? Yeah. Why?
My daughter, their attendance office, you walk into their attendance office and it's all just rainbow flags and everything else.
How is that influencing your daughter? Or do you see that?
It's pushed upon them. Why don't you walk in and there's American flags in there? Why don't you walk in there and there's actually no flags in there? It's just an attendance office. But no, I see it as they're pushing something on. They're just pushing something on a child.
Yeah. Is it affecting her?
Yeah, I would say so.
Because she's more open to those ideas, or
no,
she's like,
no.
Does she feel like it's being pushed? How old is she?
She's in eighth. She's in seventh grade.
Seventh grade.
13. I think coming from our family, and I look at the rainbow flag as something that's being pushed onto people, opposed to stay in your own fucking lane. If you want to be a transgender, but you don't have to push it out on the people. You know what I'm saying? So, and I feel that things like that are pushed. They have these, instead of when we were in school, maybe they had the basketball club or the fishing club or the reading club or whatever. And now they have these, transgender clubs or these furry clubs or whatever. So, and I feel that is a start of it. Yeah, dude. My son went to a high school and there's a litter box in a bathroom for furries to
no fucking way.
Yeah.
What the
yeah.
I don't get furries. My daughter gets really upset with me when I talk about furries because it's a thing to her. I don't get it.
So, I mean, and that's pushing it. You know what I'm saying? Like, as far as I'm concerned, if you want to act like a dog or a cat, well, then go live in the fucking backyard. You shouldn't be able to drive. You shouldn't be able to go to school because I can't send my German Shepherd to school. I can't send my calico cat to school.
It's definitely inappropriate for
ask that. It takes away, and this is the part that I don't care if you're Democrat, I don't care if you're Republican. A teacher's there to teach. You know what I'm saying? If you were to hire me to come in and build your house, I'm not going to come in there and persuade you to be, some right-wing extremist. You know what I'm saying? That's not why you're hiring me. My job is to build your house. Same with the teachers. That's why they're getting paid, is to teach. Teach math, teach English, teach history, teach science. Don't push something. There's no need, in my eyes, why there's a rainbow flag in the attendance office.
Yeah, I could see that being questionable. I think the clubs is not as bad as you're saying for LGBTQ. Like, there is people that are LGBTQ. I think they should have a club to hang out with each other. I don't think that's hurting many people.
But why are they putting it out there, though?
Because, what do you mean putting it out there? Why are they making it accessible to kids?
What?
Because there's kids that are that. There's kids that are gay.
But really?
Yeah, there's definitely kids that are gay.
But do they know that at that age?
Yeah,
I
believe they do. You knew you liked girls when you were in second grade.
But I'm a male.
What's that mean? I don't understand what you're saying.
Biologically, he's saying he's biologically.
Yeah, biologically, yeah. That's how reproduction.
There's biological males that are gay too.
So if your dad was gay, you wouldn't be here.
The fuck does that mean? I don't understand what you're saying.
Because what I'm saying is these kids don't know they don't even know what they want to do for a fucking living, and yet they want to sit there and they want to say that they're gay, or they want to cut off their dicks, or they want to do this. I don't believe in any of that shit. I don't believe in fucking one single thing.
That's really interesting. So you think somebody's like indoctrinated into being gay?
I think so. Now later on in life, if you know what you're doing, one of my best friends is gay.
Okay.
Right. He told me, I asked him, I said, when did you know you're gay? He said, I was having sex with a female, and just the way that her boobs were moving, like, disgusted him. And he's like, that's the point I knew. It had to do nothing with anything before or nothing like that. And that's when he figured out this guy was well on his path to what he does for a living. He's smart, he's intelligent, everything. So I don't necessarily I mean, I know we're getting way off subject here.
No, it's just an interesting subject.
I don't know if it's all a subject. I mean, it's a there's messages put out about this, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of media that's chatter. There's a lot of directions this go. I would say that in a sense, it's even comparable to a lot of racist talk. You could almost compare the two. You could almost set up, not entirely. I know they're completely,
They're marginalized,
but they kind of
citizens.
get put on similar pedestals, right? And platforms to talk about. So I can see this being a thing still.
Yeah, it works. It's part of this. I get it.
But
I
I
get your
just
view.
don't think that those clubs should be. Those clubs should be there.
So
Okay.
Well, I mean, what if you like believe in the devil? I mean,
Yeah, that should be there too. I mean,
So-
it's your freedom of religion.
okay, so,
I mean, I don't think religion should be in school, but I mean,
so what? This
it is a way of thinking. If you
But
believe in the devil, you
faith
can.
and all those should be in school.
I think they could have a club.
Religion shouldn't be in school.
I said I think gay people. You could have a Christian club. I wouldn't have any problem with that. I would not have a problem if the kids had a Christian club to go to and hang out with other Christians. I don't have a problem with that.
Oh, I thought you just said you don't.
Well, no, it's not supposed to by laws. There's not supposed to be
okay.
religion in school.
Can we clarify one thing? Are you talking about clubs in schools, or just like being able to have clubs, like even if it's for younger kids, but like outside of the school?
I thought. I'm sorry. I thought we were talking about like
a lunch club.
when you're going through
confirm with you.
you're going through the yearbook and it's like math club,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Spanish club. I don't LGBTQ club. I don't have a problem with that.
Okay. I don't know if I agree with that. Okay. Well, let me hear. I'll go over some of the. Okay.
Yeah.
As far as I've met little younger children who good chance they didn't know what necessarily if they were gay or not at the time. Maybe, I don't know, not in their brain. But I could tell that they were a little more feminine and stuff, right? And not just noticing, but not being like, oh, that, or I think he's gay. I wouldn't say that about a child that just shows feminine characteristics. But what I would say is that I do know some of those kids that I've met when I was younger that were like that, or that when they were younger they're like that, have grown up and they are gay. So I do think that you are born, for most people, I'm sure some people decide they are later in life or whatever, but I do think there is also where your genetic makeup has you more kind of leaning the other direction. And I do think that's a thing, because I've seen it at a young age where the kids are just, there's no reason that like, for example, the one little boy that I knew when he was younger, there's no reason that he would have been so overly feminine at that age, but he was. And then he grew up to be, even more feminine, but then ultimately gay. And so I do think there's a lot of genetics that come into that as well. But for most, but I don't know, but like I said, I'm not gay, so I don't know. But
Didn't you tell me about like in your wife's culture, like they like definitely like label it young, right? Didn't you tell me that?
yeah, that's
Talked about
the little
that.
boy. Well, my ex-wife.
Yeah. Your
That's
ex-wife. I'm sorry.
That's actually the little boy that I was speaking of. So my ex-wife is Filipino, so I went out to the Philippines. I got married in the Philippines, and and I know it's not just the Philippines that are like that. There's a lot of other countries that we perceive gay a lot differently sometimes than other countries do. Some countries completely just do not allow it, right? And then other countries just kind of I don't even think they really try to put too much emphasis on, they don't care. You're just living and that's it. They don't care what you're doing. So at least in the Philippines, like I remember, I was at the house one day and a group of women showed up and they knocked on the door and they were all wearing bikinis, like with the pageant things and stuff. And they were trying to get donations. And then, so they were speaking in Tagalog, so I didn't understand what they were saying really. But, and then after they left, find out they were all men. They were all boys. None of them were actually girls. They looked like girls, but they weren't girls. And so then, my ex-wife was joking with me. Oh, did you notice them? What did you think? I was like, I don't know. And then she said, oh, those are all boys. And I was like, oh, okay. And they were raising for a pageant. But my point to that was, what?
20 something years
Yeah,
ago.
it's 30 years ago. 22 years, 21 years ago. And they were having pageants and stuff, and they were going door to door. And it, you could argue that if you tried to do that here and go to door in neighborhoods and like, well, or be yelled at or be subject to some sort of, demeaning, being demeaned in some way. And so, yeah, I mean, it is the culture. It's definitely a culture. It's definitely a culture. It's hard, but even it's the interesting part about it is even in cultures that, and it can be debated, but, some people say, oh, like, if religion, a lot of religion says like, oh, it's forbidden, even like Catholic and stuff like that. But you'll see a lot of these cultures where very much Catholic and very religious, but you do see, it's allowed though. They don't frown upon it. I think in the United States, the church, and maybe just, and even in, it might even be with the association of, European countries as well. But I think it's more, the church is more frowned upon it and has more of a voice, more vocal about it here and stuff. And so that maybe also at times set the tone for how negative an impact, like how negative it looked, a man should be with a woman. When we were growing up, that was like a bit, those were big topics and big debates, same-sex marriage, all that stuff. Those were running points when we were growing up, and we were, in a kid, in our 20s even, as kids and stuff like that. So, so I don't know. I mean, I think that people, they just are the way they are. And as far as the clubs go, I don't have a problem with there being clubs. I don't know if I would necessarily, I don't know if I would, if I would understand like having like a trans club or anything like that at a school. Math club makes sense because you're going to study math. That has something to do with school. Chess club, okay. I could, it's you could look at chess as, it's an art. It's an art, drama club, it's an art. I don't know if I feel like that, I don't know. I feel like that sort of type of club doesn't belong in a school. I think a school should be just about learning how to navigate the world. Now, it doesn't mean that there can't be a class or there can't be curriculum that discusses this type of stuff. But at the end of the day, the reality of it is the kids are going to know anyways. We can argue it all day long, but they all have phones. They all watch videos. They all see it. Whether or not we will like it or not, that it's present or whatever, they already know. It's like even nowadays, like when we were kids, the parents was like, we got to have the talk. Now, you've already watched every damn thing that can happen in that shit on freaking Pornhub.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? As a kid.
I was given hardly any information.
I see your point on the club. I do hear it, and it's making sense to me, and I got to think about it a little bit more because the way you explain the clubs, they are parallel to what's going on in school. So I get it.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. Religion in school's a hard one. It's religion in this country is a hard one. I mean, at the end of the day, one nation under God. There's a lot of this country was founded at the time with very religious basis behind it, and so and now fast forward, those views are not as prominent as they were, 100 years ago. And even, it's just the views of religion. You see a lot more people now that, now that there's more transparency, people ask more questions. Right. And so it used to just be, you take what's fed to you, and now you can take what's fed to you, but then you can actually go and say, let me see if I like how this was prepared. And if and then you can find your own meal in a sense and read and be like, well, I don't agree with your version. I agree with this. And so I think that even that, I think that's one of the reasons when they talk about how religion is slowly has diminished and stuff. I think that that's part of it as well, is that there's just so much information out there that, but so, and then my ultimate point to that is when you look at, the arguments of the systemic racism in schools and all that stuff like that is, you almost would wonder, some of the kids that, because there are still successes, there are still kids that come out of the worst scenarios and are very, very, very wealthy, become very wealthy, whether it be sports or education, or, even politics for that matter. But the question I was almost, now that information is so more easily attainable, if you have the drive, is that opportunity there to almost take it into your own hands now and learn yourself and teach yourself the things that you want to learn versus it might not be in your school? Because that would probably be a problem for it. If that club wasn't in your school, you didn't learn it. If you didn't have shop at your high school, you didn't learn to weld generally, unless your dad taught you. But that's one of the other things, that's going away too. It's not just you see it. I think you see it first. One of the arguments a lot will be for the lower income, or for, like, I know the African American community a lot. They'll talk about how it's because there's a lot of single mother homes, right? with or one single parent homes, and a lot of the fathers are absent. That's a lot of the conversation they'll talk. Because it'd be debated back and forth. But with that, it makes a statement of that. There's value. They're trying to say there's potential some certain values that a man would maybe just. Not saying that a mom can't raise a son and be very successful and teach the son the utmost values, but I think there's a quality that's arguable that a father brings into the scenario, and that the way that son, daughter looks at the father and learns from him just like they do their mother, and be able to get back to that. But the reality is that you're kind of losing that across the board. I think I think it was lost in a sense, the redlined areas.
It goes back to saying, really does go back to that a lot.
Yeah. I hate saying I hate saying the ghetto, but I would say the areas that are redlined. But it goes back all the way to there, in my opinion. I think that's kind of where it started to be because of the welfare. That's the other argument, because of the welfare, that it actually was made. If the father stayed in the house, the mom, there was no welfare, there was no money. The father was out of the house, the mom would receive welfare and be able to live, and they were saying that, so there wasn't an incentive for dad to be there. They took away that incentive initially so that they would kick, or the father would just leave. And, but I think now, the absence of fathers is something, and the absence of the, not even the absence of fathers necessarily. I mean, I know that is a thing, but what I'm saying is that I don't know if fathers are teaching, sons and daughters are learning the skills that the parents used to teach them anyways. It used to be, you kind of followed the suit of your like we talked about before, like if you were a banker, generally your son, maybe even your daughter would probably go into some sort of finance, right? Or something like that, generally. Especially when there was generational, like it would almost be like generational, like companies and businesses, like the son would go into the same business as the father and like that. And I think now
like fourth generation,
you see a lot less of that.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, because this is now your son won't, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's the thing too, is like, because one of my things that I wonder with my kids is, is my oldest is 22, she's still in college, and then my youngest is 18, she just started college, and it's like, I talk to them and I don't even know, like, I'm like, what do you guys want to do? It's like, I don't even know exactly what direction to point them nowadays. With the technological advances, at one point, like I said before, my daughter was going to graphics design, then AI came out, and she was more of an artist, that type of graphic designer. So she was a really good artist. So, to take that and carry it over, well, AI will draw what she can draw tenfold in 2 seconds, right?
They can't do hands. Yeah,
that's true.
Terrible at hands. I don't know why.
But yeah, and so she changed her major and went into communications. It's like, it's one of those things where it's hard to even kind of direct them sometimes, because you don't even know, like, what is the good avenue nowadays.
Yeah, I got lucky. Two of my kids knew and know exactly what they want to do. Like, my daughter was an artist. She wanted to do tattoos. My youngest is like, I want to be an engineer. Like, this is what I want to do. And he's like, I'm good at math, and this is what I want to do. I had one aimless one, but he joined the military, and it's like working really well for him.
Yeah.
The one that I'm worried about is sitting across from us right now. I keep telling him he should become a attorney, and he won't listen to me. So I don't know what he's going to do.
He could become a producer.
Yeah, he's well along his way to be.
Hey, look, this is considered internship. You got to put on your resume. But no, I mean, ultimately, I think that, systemic racism is definitely present.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's, you can argue as to how and why, but people can argue that if they want to. I think it's pretty clear. Mm-hmm. Like we all said, but it all comes back to the redlining. I mean, I'm sure it was present.
Jim Crow laws.
Jim Crow, huge.
1865, slaves were not set up to succeed, right? There was laws that just opposed them succeeding. In the South, they were dealing with cops and judges that were Confederate soldiers before they were those jobs, so it starts there. It's like and the cycle repeated itself and didn't right itself for, let's see, 1965 to Civil Rights Act was 1865 to 1880 to 1965 is 80 years. They had 80 years of oppression and not having an equal playing ground.
Well, and it's not surprising. I mean, look at the war. I mean, it was, just because one side wins the war, it was still a nation divided.
Yeah.
All that division is still there. It's just that the bigger echelons of it, the politics of it, and the soldiers on the battlefield of it was over. But the way that people thought was, their voices were I wouldn't even say silenced, but
They weren't even there. They weren't allowed to be there.
no. I'm talking about each side
Got you.
of the war.
Mhm.
Like the losing side's voice gets, we won't say side, we could say, the volume turned down a little bit, but doesn't mean that underlying,
Gotcha.
their thoughts, their practices, where they feel isn't still there, isn't still being taught in those schools at the time even,
Mhm.
and so forth. So,
You know what was interesting to me? I was telling Chuck, when I was looking into systemic racism, I could not find an opposing view to it, right? Like anything that countered this. Could you find? And I actively looked for it.
I did find,
Maybe I didn't look hard
No,
enough.
no, it was hard. You're right. It was hard. I found it in, I found a couple different, like videos and stuff where people were debating it and everything. But I think that's where people want to debate the specific instances, and not in like now, like that they see more now. And yeah, they'll talk about the past and Jim Crow and redlining, but it tends to be like, they'll talk about it real quick and they'll say this is it, and they sweep to now. But it's the reality of it is, you don't even have to come to today to know that this started a long time ago. And so whatever started this, you might have removed it, redlining, but you didn't remove, just because you took the red line off that area, you didn't change that area. The banks are still not going to invest in the area because now it is a low income, high crime. The banks aren't going to invest because people don't want to move there. If you buy a home there, you're going to have a diminished value because people don't want to move there. They want to move out of there. And to say that, most people that make money, that lived in the ghetto at one point, leave. They don't stay because it's not safe, because, many reasons. I mean, look how many, just if you use example of like, of rappers over the last 20 years, even, look how many of those kids were gunned down, like going to, like the one kid was gunned down going to buy a 4-wheeler or whatever, and then robbed, or gunned down in their cars because they stay in those areas where they grew up, and they're dangerous,
I just had a case across from my courtroom where it was a rapper. He gets out of the studio, goes to get gas. These guys see him, try to rob him. They go on like a high-speed chase, and he crashes into a pole. And him and his girlfriend are in the car, and he goes, run. He tells his girlfriend to run. He starts running. They come back, execution style, shoot him in the back of the head, steal all his stuff.
While he went to run?
Yeah, when he was running.
And they let the girlfriend run away?
She hid. Yeah, I think they split, and that's just an example. Yeah, it's
well, there's zero. This was where this could get interesting. There's zero remorse at times, it feels like, because the consequences aren't feared. It's one of those things where it's like, it comes down to, doesn't have to be the same scenario, but the border crossing with you're like murdering, shooting them coming across the border, doesn't have to be that scenario. But if there's not a severe consequence that sets, like, look, kids grow up, you punish kids. If you give them a light punishment, there's a good chance you're going to revisit this multiple times. If you tend to give them more heavy punishment, they learn a lesson. The punishment that they hate the most, that hurts the most to give as a parent, right, that doesn't let them go do stuff for the weekend, rest of that, that's the one that resonates the most. That's the one that makes them learn. I remember all those that my mom did to me. I don't remember the light ones. I remember all the hard ones. I'll be like, my mom made me walk up the hill. Like, yeah, I remember all the hard ones and learn from them. But that's the problem, is what's the punishment for murder?
I can't believe that these people don't fear that. I mean, what is the punishment? It's either 25 to life or death.
But they don't fear it because on the other side, generally, is just a lot of their former counterparts that are already in jail, that they're just going to jail and living that life and then coming back out. It's two different worlds. It's, in a sense, it's almost like there's a world and a life in there. The people argue that jail is its own economy, it's its own, civilization in a sense. It has its governors, and it's not the warden, you know what I mean, inside. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. And that's me speaking, from the outside. Looking in 100%, but
it would be hard for us to understand this
100%.
But at the same given time, if the government is paying for your food and your housing and everything else, like, in reality, to have a repercussion of one of these, like what you're talking about, what's the difference? They're just going to go to another house and the government's paying for their housing and for their food. It's not like a huge degree of separation in reality. I mean, yes, there's the freedom part of it that's getting taken away from you. But besides a little bit of freedom, like if you're in these low income areas and the government's paying for your food and they're paying for your housing, and then you go and you commit a crime, you're just, I mean, I hate to say it, it's kind of sounds cutthroat, but you're literally just moving to another house and the same thing's actually happening to you. You know what I'm saying?
No, yeah, that's interesting. I do see.
True. Let's say that you work, you have a house, you have kids, nobody in the prison system. That person isn't as prominent to go commit a crime, to go put themselves in jail. You know what I'm saying? Because you're thinking, shit,
Because there's something to lose.
I'm going to lose my family. Yeah. I'm going to lose my job.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same given time, if you're just hanging out at home all day,
or dealing drugs
for all these, like at the end of the day, I hate to say it, like there's not a huge separation.
Well, and think about it like this too. Think about all the guys you grew up with, right? Just randomly, even guys with you're friends with right now, right? But you guys all kind of stay together, you hang together and everything like that. And then, and you're into, some of you guys, you might do some shady stuff or whatever. But anyways, let's say half of your, or even just a quarter of your friend pool is in prison, right? And you go commit a crime. You're not going to be as scared when you know that you're going to, and when I say your friend group, that would be you're specifically going, but when I would reference that to, it would be the gang, it'd be your gang. You're not going to be as scared when you know that your gang is in there, that they have hopefully, that you're going to hope so, they have your back, your friends. There's not as much of a fear, for example, but the opposite side of that would be for the example of like, if you or me did something and went to prison, we would be fucking like, oh, fuck, this is about to be hard.
Terrible.
Because we don't have any affiliations and stuff like that. We don't know anybody in there. We don't know anything about it. And so...
Have you seen the movie with Will Ferrell? Is it called Hard Time or something like that?
I don't think I've seen that one. I've seen that.
But, it's like, at the end of the day, though, and the only reason I'm saying that, I don't know, I'm framing that, that doesn't apply to everybody. But my point to that is that, if there's not a fear of this is what's going to happen to me if I commit this crime, I still think personally, if you commit a murder, that should be your punishment.
100%.
Death should be your punishment. If that was the punishment,
way different.
Guaranteed. Like when you were in the military, I guarantee you heard of chop square.
Mm-hmm.
And then basically when you go to Iraq, Saudi Arabia, you steal, they chop off your hand. You see a dude with two hands missing, he was a bad thief.
No, you guys opened my eyes on that. Your point on that is very interesting. That they're not losing anything. They're just moving from one house to another house.
It's sad to say, but it's the short end of the story,
Yeah. If you guys want to take a break and maybe talk about something different, or
cool. Or we can,
right.
Or we can,
what do you guys
break
think?
or wrap? We can even wrap. Well, it's 11 o'clock.
Wrap it up.
Just wrap it up. It was a good discussion.
All right.
I really like talking to you guys about this. It was interesting.
If anybody else wants to help us dive into other aspects or comment on it, let us know things that maybe we don't know and understand about it. We're definitely up to talking about it.
Yeah.
Mike's already got his one fan on the comment section out there. So he says,
Steve, I'm glad you listened and glad you said something.
Like,
but you other people that aren't my fans, you can say something too. Just be nice, all right?
Once again, it was a fun topic. It was good. I think it's something we could actually circle back, because in reality, it was interesting. I didn't know much about it, but I think.
Well, and I think that's the purpose of all these. It's like it's, and that's the understanding that hopefully when people, even if they, if we were lucky and get somebody to watch, is the fact of that. It's these topics that people scream about all these times, and I like that we are able to go over them. And it's the reality. I think the reality for most people don't deep dive into shit.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like a 60-second window of information, and they'll see whatever view is thrown their direction based off of, like we've talked about before. If you sit on a certain side of the hedge or the ledge, you tend to get views. Social media and everything else will project, or you tend to seek out the views that you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think it's good to have these types of conversations when we don't really there hasn't been a full deep dive, and a lot of people like to think they know what it's about and not fully understand what it's about. So not saying that we nailed down every details, but I think the conversations like these are good because it's a lot of discovery And it's a lot of understanding and trying to figure it out just as like a couple guys hanging out and talking about it. And that's what I like, we're not experts, you know what I mean? But the reality that it's like just an open forum and conversation, but I learned a lot just researching these things sometimes, even like the California high-speed rail.
All right, we can do that next. I'm so sorry, John.
Appreciate it.
All right,
See you next week.
peace.
Bye.